In this lesson, you'll learn the three properties of addition: the identity, commutative, and associative. First, the identity property of addition. This property tells you that when a number is added to a zero, the sum will be that number. So let's look at a picture example. We have Bailey the butterfly here, and she is going to be added to a zero. Now, a lot of times I like to think of this zero as a mirror. Bailey the butterfly is looking in the mirror, making sure she looks good for the day. And what do you see when you look into a mirror? You see yourself. So when Bailey is added to zero, she still equals Bailey. If we turn that into numbers, we have 5 plus 0 equals 5. This is the identity property of addition because 5 plus 0, when that 5 looks into the mirror, he still sees himself as 5. Again, even though the number gets larger, 37 plus 0 equals 37. 37 looks into the mirror and sees herself, and she still is equal to 37. Another way to remember the identity property of addition, I have focused down on the ID, the identity. Your identity is who you are, and a lot of people have to prove their identity. If they go to the grocery store and write a check, they have to prove that that's their checkbook, so they pull out their ID. Well, I've brought my ID today to show you that I indeed am a teacher at Lynchburg City Schools. So if you pull out your ID, that's your identity. So who are you going to see on your ID? You're going to see yourself. Who's the butterfly going to see? Himself. Who's the 5 and the 37 going to see? They're going to see themselves because that is indeed who they are. So you can remember the identity property of addition. Anytime a number is added to a zero, the sum will be that number. Think of the zero as a mirror. You see your identity. The second property is the commutative property of addition. When you're driving to school, or I'm driving to work, you commute. It's called commuting. And you commute to school and you commute back home. Same road, different way to travel it. But you're still going to this, you're still getting the same, you're still on the same road. So if we look at numbers, 3 plus 6 we know is 9. And if we flip-flop that order, 6 plus 3, it still equals 9. So just like with our commuting, you're still traveling on the same road. 3 plus 6 has the same sum as 6 plus 3. This is the commutative property of addition. Another example, 19 plus 7 we know is 26. And if you flip-flop the order, 7 plus 19 is also equal to 26. The commutative property says that the sum of two numbers is the same regardless of the order they are added. It doesn't matter if you add 3 plus 6 or flip-flop it 6 plus 3, you're going to have the same sum. The third property of addition is the associative property of addition. This property basically deals with numbers associating with one another. So let's look to see what this property says. It says when adding three numbers, the sum will be the same regardless of how they are grouped. So even if they're grouped differently, the sum will be the same. So let's take a look at a picture example. We have Larry, Curly, and Mo. Larry and Curly, today they want to work together in a group. So we're going to put them in a group, but Mo feels like just working independently. So they are added up. Here they are. Then another day in school, well, Larry decides he wants to work independently, and Curly and Mo decide to partner up. Regardless of how they group themselves, they still are Larry, Curly, and Mo. So that's the cool thing about the associative property of addition. Regardless of how they group themselves, they still have their same identity. So if we turn that into numbers, 4 plus 9 plus 1. In the first one, when you have parentheses have to be added first. So in the parentheses we have 4 plus 9, which is 13, plus 1 is 14. Well, if you group it a different way, and you start with 4 plus 9 plus 1, you start with the parentheses. 9 plus 1 is 10, plus 4 is 14. Regardless of how they're grouped, even though you're adding the parentheses first, you still have the same sum. Now, when the numbers get larger, this is a really helpful property for mental math. So let's look at this last example. 29 plus 75 plus 25 equals 29 plus 75 plus 25. The numbers are grouped differently. So in this first example, let's see, 29 plus 75. Takes me a minute to think about that. So 29 plus 75, 104, okay, plus 25, all right, so that's 129. Takes a little bit longer to add this type of grouping, but if you put the grouping this way, 75 plus 25, well, I know how to count by 25s because of money. Quarters are 25 cents, 25, 50, 75, $1, or 25, 50, 75, 100. So you can know that 25 plus 75 or 75 plus 25 really quickly is 100 plus that 29. So now that you have the 100 so quickly, and you know to just slide those right into the tens and ones place, so it's going to equal 129. Yes, you have the same answers on both sides. Yes, you have the same sum on both sides. However, when you group them differently, as the numbers get larger, it is very helpful for mental math to use the associative property of addition. Again, when adding three numbers, the associative property says that the sum will be the same regardless of how they are grouped. Here are 4 questions for us to figure out which property is shown. The first one, we have 8 plus 0 equals 8. If you remember, the 8's going to look into the mirror, so let's draw that fancy mirror, and he indeed is going to see himself. 8 plus 0 is 8. I remember pulling out my ID, and I remember seeing myself, so I know that is the identity property. The second example, 7 plus 3 equals 3 plus 7. Alright, so I see that the order is changed. It was 7 plus 3, now it's changed. That reminds me of commuting to school on the same road. Even if I go one way, and then I flip-flop it and go a different way. So here's my car, my fancy schmancy car, and I'm going to go 7 plus 3, then I'm going to flip-flop it, 3 plus 7. I know that that's the commutative property of addition. Number 3, 26 plus 0 equals 26. Again, I see my mirror. I see that fancy mirror. And the 26 is looking into the mirror, sees himself, so he's still equal to 26. I know that's the identity property. Number 4, 9 plus 6 plus 14 equals 9 plus 6 plus 14. The 9 and 6 are grouped here. The 6 plus 14 are grouped here. I remember Larry, Curly, and Moe. They wanted to be partners one day, and then the next day, Curly and Moe wanted to be partners. They wanted to switch up, one be independent, one be partners. So it doesn't matter whether it's grouped one way or another. The associative property told me that you'll have the same sum. So I know this, both sides have the same sum. 9 plus 6 is 15, plus 14 is 29, and then 6 plus 14 is 20, plus 9 is 29. That is the associative property of addition.